Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another episode of SCUM. This right here is the podcast where, of course, we dive into the deepest, darkest, murkiest waters with a plethora of legendary guests. I am, of course, your host, your bastard of ceremonies, the numero uno scumbag, Rex Ruger. That's Rex with thrice X's. If I can kick a little old English to you. Don't get the 3 X's twisted. They're there for a reason. You might also know me as AKA the King of Sleaze, AKA the Hair Metal High Priest, and most importantly, AKA Diamond David Lee Roth Jr. Take one look. Father and son ruling the universe as only the Roth clan can. It is undeniable that you are looking at the son of glam, the front man for the band. I just smoked a few grams. I got a million fans. I'm your ice cream man. Mr. Wop, Babaloo, Bop, Wop, Bam, Bam, Shazam, Hot Damn. Feeling good. Most importantly, everybody in the house is looking good. And that is, of course, made possible by, and I'm double fisting today because I got industrial strength and I got the light stuff. Industrial strength, diet, if you will. But if you want the quaff like Roth, get you some. And spray responsibly. I am, of course, coming to you, as always, from the lush lavender lounge of love. And I am joined, as always, by my sidekick, my confidant, my best pal, Keith Hernandez Puppet. You know him from the 1986 world champion New York Mets. That's right. And now, he's my amigo, if you will. Plays the role of doorman, head of security, consigliere, sometime drug connection. But I digress. This is, of course, the No Frills podcast. You get no frills because you get plenty of thrills. Take a look. Here they are, gratis. You're welcome for getting to take a look at all this. I know it's a lot. Drink it in, folks. Drink it in. I am a generational talent. We don't come along that often. So soak us in. Soak in your heroes while they're here. Plus, this is a No Frills podcast because I don't know how to give you frills. I am 50 years old and know zero about technology. You're lucky I can even get us this far. But we are through the looking glass, and we are constantly bringing you kick-ass episodes. And it's a miracle. Me being the hardest working man in show business, I'm busy. I'm out there fronting numerous glam and sleaze metal bands all around the tri-state New York area and up and down the eastern seaboard. So, again, you're welcome for the awesome content. So, and you know we don't edit nothing here, so obviously you see everything here. The bells and whistles. It is what it is. We got a kick-ass guest for you today, though, and you're seeing me inviting him in. Hopefully, anyway. And, of course, this is all part of the No Frills. Gonna watch me on here like a half-blind jackass as I copy and paste my invites. But guess what? There is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Because when said invite is sent, the magic happens. And today will be no different. Today will be no different, my friends. Because today we got a good guest. We've taken a couple of dry runs and we failed miserably with technical difficulties, which just goes to show that these musicians are not as tech savvy as they'd like us to believe. But our guest is here right now, so hopefully we can get this off the ground. Another episode of SCUM. Let's give it a shot. It's either we give it a shot or we fail miserably, right? I don't know. We get on here.
All right, how we looking?
Hey, there we go.
Yeah, I just had to restart Safari.
Third time's a charm, right? And so I do a little preamble, beforehand. So, it's easier if I just go out, start recording again, do my little ridiculous preamble and kind of promote my thing and then kind of send the link and invite the guest in, which is why I kept doing the whole, let me open up a new room or whatever. But this is, of course, Adam Curry. And as I was saying before, when I was just reading your lips, not to be mistaken with MTV VJ Adam Curry. Although you do have a nice head of hair, but he had that. I mean, do you remember?
Oh, I remember, man. That was the 80s, man. That was big hair time.
Oh, man. What a time it was.
Into the 90s, yeah.
Adam Curry, I guess most people would probably associate you the most these days with Candlebox. But what else you got going on, though? You're a busy guy, right? You got other shit going on.
Yeah, man. It's hard to remember it. I think I have I'm going to have 4 different albums coming out this year.
Nice.
Obviously, we're working on a new album for Candlebox. We're going in the studio in April. So that'll come out sometime this summer, I would imagine, if all goes well. If maybe fall, if it takes a little while, I don't know.
But what will happen, though? What will happen, because I just came to see you guys here in upstate New York a couple of months back. You came to one of the casinos here, and I was fortunate enough to meet the guys opening for you, Hold On Hollywood. I've had the lead singer on here. Great bunch of guys. Awesome show. But during my research, because I actually interviewed BJ actually at the venue.
Right.
Which if I knew a goddamn thing about technology, I would have already had that episode up. It's just sitting on my phone because usually I do them like this. I don't usually do them face to face, Right. So, but the point I want to make is, am I to understand that Kevin wants to hang it up with the live touring?
Yeah, I read into that what you will. I mean, I think really when it boils down to it, he's just not looking to do the heavy album tour cycle.
Okay.
So I've got the feeling he's just going to do maybe select shows, things that inspire him. But I think he's wanting to get off the grind train of the system as it is, Yeah. And it's hard. I mean, these days, you put a lot into making a record, and your hardcore fans go to it, but there's just so much stuff out there that it's really tough to connect a lot of. I mean, we've been touring. So I've been working with Kevin for 20 years now. Candlebox got back together in 2006. I've been with him since 2007.
Yeah.
And I've been going through, we've gone through cities 5th time through, and I'll run into somebody, in 2013, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you guys were still touring." It's like, we've played here 5 times in the last 7 years.
Yeah.
So it just gets missed. You know what I mean? It's really hard.
Yeah.
So it's you put your heart into the work, you do good stuff, and then it's hard to get exposure to people to even if they can say, "Hey, I actually hate this record." You can't even get to those people. You know what I mean? It's right. So I think that he's just looking at it like the amount of effort that goes into maintaining that routine and that cycle just isn't really worth it at this point.
Yeah. And it is a shame, because we certainly don't want to see him, leaving the stage altogether, because, he still sounds, I mean, all you guys do, but I mean, he still sounds phenomenal.
Yeah. I always say he's one of those singers that other singers love to hate, because he hasn't lost anything on his voice. If anything, from the early days, he's gotten more control and he knows his voice better. So he's, you know what I mean? He's actually technically a better singer than he probably was back then. He sounds just as great. It's just that I think it's easier for him now. It's amazing. The guy doesn't do vocal warm-ups. He doesn't do anything. We do a sound check. Well, we do a sound check, and he'll sing a couple of songs in sound check, and that'll open him up. But he's just got a natural, God-given talent. He's just great at that. So he's very fortunate.
Now, obviously, we all remember Candlebox bursting onto the scene in the early '90s. Were you now? You say you go back with Kevin 20 years, but early on when Candlebox, we're first on the scene. Were you a fan?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I heard the stuff. I loved what they did. It's right up my alley. It was from the Seattle thing, but it wasn't the full grunge thing. And I love the grunge bands. I gravitated. For me, it was. I felt that there was this real intentional trend to kind of lo-fi things, which I didn't like when I felt that it was a little too obvious. But then there were certain bands that kept all of that. I mean, you look at a Alice in Chains and a Soundgarden. They didn't dumb anything down. You know what I mean? But they got this really dark, raw energy. My opinion, I think Guns N' Roses actually kicked that off. The 80s, the hair bands became a bit of a parody of themselves. Yeah. And the first band to fire the shot of things are going to change was GNR. And I think that opened the door for people to accept darker, grittier bands like Nirvana and Alice in Chains and Pearl Jam. It all came out of that, I think.
Right. So you're basically saying that like that 80s scene had kind of become derivative of itself. Just everything was
100%.
Everything was about partying and chicks and drinking, and there was a lot of style over substance back then.
Well, and it evolved that way. I think in the early days of that stuff, I mean, you go back to the early 80s and some of those bands, there was some really good stuff. And there's always great people that popped out. But
oh, yeah.
In the 80s, the record companies realized they could sell their whole catalog again as CDs.
Yeah.
So they had so much money, they had no idea what to do with it. So they were just throwing money around like crazy. And like anything, I think that there were some artists that maybe shouldn't have gotten their shot, that were pushed, and I think some other people got overlooked. Obviously people follow trends and what's selling this week and everything. So it just, they strip mined LA, in particular. That was kind of the core of that. And you get to the cream of the crop, and then if you keep going back to the well, you're not getting that anymore. And I think that's just what happened.
So how do you, or vice versa, Kevin, how do you guys come into each other's life?
Through a mutual friend. My wife works for Universal Music at that time. It was already Universal. Yeah, she had already switched over from Polygram. And there was a guy, Dave Schwartz, who he worked with my wife, and Kevin was putting together a band called the High Watts, because Candlebox had ended in '99. So this is probably like 2002. And he had seen me play with another project that I had, and Kevin was putting together a band, and he's like, "Hey, I think I know the guy that would be perfect for you for this." And so we met, we had a cup of coffee, and 3-4 months later, he called me up and said, "Hey, you want to hit the road?" I was like, "Sure." So that tour kind of fell apart, but a couple months later, we got out on the road with that. And so we've been working together ever since. We've done a bunch of different projects together, and it's always been good.
Are you guys already kind of doing the tour itinerary where you scale back? Because obviously when you're not in your 20s no more, the priorities, change, obviously. I mean, I don't know everyone's personal story, but, people settle down, they have children and everything. So do you guys already have a pretty scaled back itinerary, and Kevin wants to scale it back more? Or are you guys really out there still a lot on the road?
Well, it kind of varies. And obviously the last few years have been a huge wild card, because once the pandemic hit, for 18 months, we were off the road. We did a couple of acoustic shows, Kevin and I, but like as far as the full band, it was just done. So it's really kind of hard to say, but the short answer is, we did scale back. After we did the tour, the year we released Into the Sun, we were out for 12 weeks solid. And all of us at that time, Kevin had just become a new father. Pete wasn't a dad yet. Scott wasn't a dad yet. Sean wasn't a dad yet back then in that band. I was the only one, and Kevin had just become a new father. And we all realized, even the guys that didn't have kids, they were like, 12 weeks is just way too long at this age, because everyone pretty much was married or had a significant other or whatever. Yeah. And we were just like, we're beating ourselves up. So let's scale this back. And we were like a perfect thing would be, maybe 4 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Yeah. So we've kind of aimed for that over the years. That being said, the rumors are, I can't give any details, but we're going to be out solid this summer. I think it's going to be, I'm hearing rumors of hundreds of shows.
Okay.
And it's going to be probably the busiest year the band has done since 2008, 2009.
And now I know you guys are going out with Bush. Are most of those dates going to be with Bush, or are just a handful of those?
No, actually, so it was a really smart thing that Bush did. They advertised all the bands that are opening for them on one thing. So we're only doing 4 shows.
Oh, okay.
We're out the 14th through the 18th doing some East Coast dates. So all those bands they mentioned as openers, it's rotating.
Okay. So, okay, gotcha. Okay. Was music always going to be the direction you were going to go in life? Did you ever entertain anything else? And how early in your life did you know that this is the direction I'm going to go?
Well, I was a massive music fan as a kid. My dad was a big hi-fi buff. Like when he was a kid, he built his own stereos. Back then, you built hi-fi. You didn't buy it.
That's cool.
50s.
Yeah.
So I loved music. I think as a little kid, the only other thing I really wanted to do was be an astronaut. I wanted to go to outer space, wanted to go to the moon.
That's pretty typical though, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then I realized, the amount of school and science and math, and I was even like, okay, that's a tough sell to get through all that to get to where you want to be as a kid. That's eternity. And then you realize, even if you do all those things, the odds of you being selected and actually getting to go up, even once you get into the program, are small. So I think it just, I was like, okay, I'm still a fan of space. And then I got into music, and really, I mean, since grade school. I really wanted to. I didn't get any traction until I was probably in junior high.
And are you one of those guys that's a multi-instrumentalist? Like in Candlebox, you play bass, but do you play other things?
Yeah, I play some guitar. I'll pick away. I can do some keyboards, and when I need to. I've actually just laid down some B3, some pseudo B3 today for another project I have. But I'm
why
definitely
the bass though? Why the bass though? Because everybody, when they start out, either wants to be the front man or they want to be the guitar guy. It always seems like, drums and bass are cool, but they don't seem to be what kids gravitate to. Did you gravitate to the bass real early on?
Fairly early on, but it was a bit of circumstance. So I wanted to be a guitar player as a kid. That was where I wanted to go. And I took some crappy lessons when I was like in the 5th grade, and it was like a 6-week course in a community college, and bless my mom for sending me there and everything. But they just didn't. When I left, I was playing Old Lang Syne, and we learned the notes on the high 3 strings in 6 weeks. I didn't play a single chord. I didn't play a single rock song. It didn't sound anything like the guitar I wanted, right?
Yeah, right.
So I kind of gave up. I kind of just assumed I couldn't do it. And then when I moved to Alaska when I was in the 7th grade, 8th grade, and I wanted to get a fun class. Of course, I just wanted to be a slacker in school, and I was like, well, hey, maybe I could play guitar in the school band. And that day, when I was signing up and registering for school, the music teacher happened to be there, and they called him in and said, hey, because it was a really small school. It was junior high and high school combined, there were 200 students. So it was a small pool to pull from.
Yeah.
He goes, look, it's a small class. He goes, I really can't use a guitar. I have no use for it. He goes, but if you'd like to play bass, I could probably find a spot for you there. So that was really instrumental to me, because then I got to learn music and music theory. I could read a little bit back then. Of course, I don't anymore.
Yeah.
So that pushed me into that way. And then I was kind of a dual person. I went back and forth between bass and guitar for years. And then when I was in high school, I probably like freshman, probably like junior year, I realized I had this epiphany that if I played guitar, I could probably get into a band with everyone else. But if I played bass, I could get into a good band.
Yeah.
And at that point, you're a kid, you want to fast track yourself. You want to play with the better musicians. You want to actually do gigs. You want to get out there and do stuff rather than be, we've got half a band and I'm playing guitar, but this is going nowhere. So that kind of like really solidified it. I play guitar, I write on guitar a lot. But it's not my bread and butter. I'll go out and I'll do acoustic gigs with Kevin, but I'm a hacky lead guitar player. I'm not great at it. Rhythm guitar, I'm fine. I can pick through things and play, but it's not my forte.
I'm always fascinated, though, as a non-musician myself. My day job is in healthcare. So I'm the opposite end of the spectrum from doing anything cool like in the music world. But that fascinates me when you say you don't read music. Just to pick your brain for a minute, as an outsider looking in, when you don't know how to read music, and I've heard this same story from lots of other musicians. If you guys are making a song, how do you know like what to play? That's always fascinated to me. Do you just write your own bass parts for the song? Like when you get together with a bunch of musicians, let's say, how the fuck do you know what you're doing?
Well, I mean, that's where playing for years, you have an experience in your mind. You hear what it is you want it to do. Like when you hear someone play something, I immediately think, I know what the bass could do to fit with that, to counteract that, to balance that.
Okay.
You're always looking for something that's unique. I think when you get to the level of writing and recording and being a touring musician and being in that thing, you always have to have your ears open. There's certainly people that learn it note by note and they play the exact same thing all the time. That's a different school. That's more of a classical school, because those people learn to read the notes off the page and they perfect exactly what was written. Whereas where the side we're coming from is more of an improvisational jazz mindset, if you will, which is, what can you play cool to make this thing happen?
Right.
So you're searching it. I mean, you do need to know your notes. You know what I mean? You need to know some theory. And it got to help if you don't know your difference between major and minor and things like that.
Right.
You know some scales. I've done some things, but I don't ever read notes off a page. I mean, if I get called for a session, if at most someone will hand me a chord chart. These are the chords. So you know what changes you're going to, and then you hear the rhythm and you hear the vibe that's going on, and you tailor your performance, your parts to support that song.
So you could say a lot of it is really off like intuition and feel.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And to that point, it's like if you're playing a song, especially if it's new like that, and you're doing things, you never get the same performance twice.
Right.
You know, it's not exactly the same. You get the same vibe, you know,
Right.
But you'll do a different fill here, or maybe in this one you change to this pattern, you drop this one beat because you're feeling this differently. And the other thing is you're reactive to the other musicians.
Right.
You know,
right.
if the drummer plays a different pocket, I'm not going to force what I was doing the take before. I'm going to go with him, you know?
Right. Right. So obviously, with Kevin being the only remaining original member, when you guys get together and you guys create, what's the creative process like in Candlebox? Because it is Kevin's band. Does he come in with everything already kind of written and prepared? Is it more of a collaborative kind of democratic process where everybody has input? What's it like creating with Kevin?
It's all over the map. I mean, you know, we've gone from back in the High Watt days and the first few records that I did with the band, there was more collaborative stuff. We got together and wrote together.
Yeah.
These days, Kevin's kind of more looking for outside inspiration from other people. So we don't get together and write anymore. But when we get in the studio, it's still up to me to come up with my parts.
Right.
You know, so it's a bit all over the map. I think that, you know, being anyone who's artistic, you're always looking for something that inspires you. So anytime Kevin wants to do a record, he's needs to be inspired by something. Right. And if you're not inspired, it's really, really difficult and painful. So he's always looking for something that'll just spark his interest. And then if he's inspired, then it just rolls. You know, and that's
so does he usually come in and tell the guys does he usually come in and tell you guys, you know, like, hey, you know, here's kind of what I'm vibing with right now. Here's kind of what's rolling around in my head. Here's kind of some of the themes I want to touch on this album. Does he kind of bring you guys that?
Yeah, that's always been his thing. Even going back to the days when we got together as a little core and wrote all together, he would come in and say, hey, I dig these songs. I dig this vibe. Let's write a song, not take this song, but be inspired by this and come up with something that has similar characters to it, has similar energy to it. We'll do that. It's always, he's very good at knowing where he wants to end up with things. You know, he won't, sometimes he'll come in with a complete song, but he's looking for someone to play a progression or a change or something that excites him. And then he'll go from there. And then we build on that.
How much of the we spoke a couple minutes ago about them originally coming from Seattle and the whole grunge explosion around that time, in the pantheon of all those great bands that came out of Seattle around that time, in your mind, where's Candlebox with the rest of those bands? Because I think sometimes that they get criminally underrated when you're talking about the Alice in Chains and the Soundgardens, almost sometimes where they're almost criminally forgotten about sometimes when you're talking about Pearl Jam and Nirvana and all those bands. But when they first burst onto the scene and you heard them, and obviously you said that you were a fan of a lot of that grunge stuff, where do you think their place is among those bands?
Well, I think that they are kind of overlooked, and the problem is that Candlebox, the guys in the band were a couple of years younger than those bands that came out.
Right.
So, Kevin grew up idolizing, those players and those guys, I mean, Mother Love Bone was his
good friendship with Andy. Yep.
It was a huge thing for him. But again, Andy was in his 20s, Kevin was still in his teens,
Right.
So Candlebox was never a grunge band. And that's the other problem that came along is that they were caught up because once the record companies realized, hey, this grunge thing is hot and we're selling a lot of it, they went and said, hey, how many more bands can we find from Seattle, right?
Right.
So they found Candlebox, which wasn't a grunge band, but they got caught in that. So there was a lot of actually backlash from the grunge fans, so to speak, the grunge movement. So it was a very tight-knit scene in Seattle. And Candlebox was seen musically as a bit of an outsider. And so I think certain people got resentful of their success.
Yeah.
You guys really aren't what we're about. You're coattailing. It's like they were never pretending to be what you were about. They were from the same area. They had a lot of the same values, but musically it was more of a blues rock band.
I
hard
agree.
Rock edge band. Yeah. There were a lot of guitar solos, and I mean Pearl Jam. I guess most of those bands kind of bucked the trend and had it because when the '90s came around, it became a thing of the anti-guitar solo.
Right.
where obviously, you had Pete who laid down some amazing stuff. So Candlebox was just cut from a different cloth. And I think that hurt them in some regards.
Yeah. Maybe they needed more flannel.
Well, that's the thing, is they wore it. And that's the thing, that was a Seattle thing. And
Sure.
so I think that because they came out and they kind of dressed similar to those bands, they were looked at as posers for those bands.
Right.
But it wasn't the thing. That was what everyone wore up there. So they weren't dressing to look like these guys. That's what they all wore up there.
But
so
it's
funny
that you say that he, that he idolized Andy Wood so much, because I certainly, especially just going on appearances alone and the music. But I mean, you certainly can't say that Mother Love Bone was following any of those trends either, because Andy was extremely flamboyant and seemed to really march to the beat of his own drum as far as how he dressed and, the music and all that stuff.
Yeah, and also remember that they were ahead of the curve of all those other bands we're talking about. I mean, Pearl Jam built out of the remains of that, right?
You're right.
So, but all those guys knew each other and played together. Andy was unique. He was a unicorn. There was really nobody like him. Like, when you talk to Kevin, like, I didn't live up there, so I only know it from this perspective, right? But Andy was a special individual. He was kind of the rock star of that entire era up there. He was looked up to, and bands like Soundgarden and Alice in Chains were still running under the radar. I mean, they were known in Seattle, but they Mother Love Bone was it at that point. So that was a major thing. So he was his own entity. He kind of kickstarted that whole scene,
So when you guys put out 2021's Wolves, which amazing album, what were the themes that Kevin brings for that specific album? Because obviously, like once you release music, a lot of times the fans, put meanings on songs and, interpret it, the way it makes them feel. But did Kevin come in specifically for Wolves with any of those ideas that we spoke about? Like, here's some themes I want to touch on.
Well, I think when he got down to writing his lyrics, he did that. But I think the making of the record, it was a strange time. I kind of remember at that time, I felt like he was being more told to do a record.
Yeah.
I don't think that he wasn't hot on it.
Yeah.
So he looked for outside inspiration. He worked with a few outside writers, and he kind of looked for people to provide things. And I think that once he got to the lyrical standpoint, because most of his lyrics, I believe, were all done after the album was recorded.
Okay.
So we did the music for it. He had melodies in mind, and I'm sure he had his basic structures, but most of those things I didn't hear until he went 6 months after the album was recorded, or 4 months, whatever, and laid down his vocals. Well, I just heard the music. So, and that's a strange thing. 2021's Wolves, which was recorded in August of 2019.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, that's the thing. It was supposed to come out in 2020 for that summer's tour, but then the pandemic hit, and so we shelved it for an entire year. Yeah, because there's no point in putting it out if you're not going to go play.
And when you go back and when something like that gets shelved for a year, do you go back and revisit those songs and see if they still, hit your ears the same way now that some time has gone by? Or do you just say, you know what, we recorded those, we're going to go with them? Do you go in when something sits on the shelf like that and tweak it in any way?
Not really, because I mean, we laid those songs down. We did a very short pre-production, very short recording process. It was done the basic, the bulk of it was done live.
Yeah.
So we laid our stuff down, other than kind of reviewing our parts and remembering exactly what we played in this section and that. No, because you're happy with what you walk away with. And if you're not happy with it, you don't walk away with it. You either fix it or you dismiss it. So when it comes time to hit the road again, it's really, Candlebox is one of those bands that's been around long enough. It's hard to fit all these new songs in. So you have to be very careful. You're excited. You've got a new record. You'd like to play these songs.
Right.
And then you have to figure out what ones really work live, which ones are really important. And then you have to roll them in and out of the set, because there's, 6 other studio albums that you're pulling from. So it's weirder now, because when you do a whole record, you're not going to play every song on that record live, certainly not in one show, so you're going to mix in 3 or 4 at most on a given night. And if you're going out, if you're a support act and you're only playing, an hour or 45 minutes, now you're really kind of stuck, because there's certain songs you just have to play. So they're going to take up that space. So you maybe only have 2 or 3 songs you can mix in a night.
Right. So you're saying like, so when you guys are sitting there deciding a set list, is that all Kevin? Because obviously you guys being fans of the bands and appearing on some of those albums, you guys might have ones that you want to play. Is that also kind of a collaborative democratic thing? You guys like say like, each pick a couple of songs, or, does Kevin kind of just dictate what the set list is going to be?
Well, I mean, Kevin, for years, he used to build his own set list, and I think he just kind of burnt out doing it. And I think it's also, I think he probably felt that same struggle of what do I leave in? What do I take out?
Right.
How do you satisfy everything? So he's kind of given the set list building over to Island. Island was happy to take that on.
Okay.
But it always goes to Kevin, and Kevin gets, he's got final approval. But yeah, any of us in the band can be like, hey, I'd really love to play this song tonight, because Kevin's also looking for us to be inspired, right?
Right.
Someone's like, man, I really want to play this song. I'm dying to play it. Yeah, let's put it in,
And I get what you say too, because you can't send away the crowd without doing like your far behinds and your songs like that, because they're staples, obviously, and people are coming there a lot of times to hear those songs. They're. So when COVID was going on, you just spoke about the lockdown and everything. What was it like for you specifically? Did you find it to be abundantly creative time? Did you do any writing? Did you do any playing? Like, how did you process going through that?
Yeah, it was a very, very difficult time. My other band, Sons of Silver, we were incredibly productive. We knocked out, I think, 2 or 3 EPs in that time.
Yeah.
We probably wrote, 20 songs. So we knew we hadn't been touring that much. We hadn't been out since 2019, and we were supposed to go out in 2020 also. But once we knew we couldn't go out, then we were like, instead of just sitting around and doing nothing, let's write. So we did that. There were a few other things that I got in and did some stuff with. Kevin and I went out. We did a couple of acoustic shows, and then just personally, it's just hard because my entire adult life, adolescent life up till now has been centered around this. I've done many other things, but it's always been this. So at that point, you're starting to question, who are you? What do you do?
Right.
So I think it was more challenging, not so much musically, but personally. I mean, add to that, not to be on a downer, but my father passed away from COVID in November 2020. So
sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that.
Thank you. And that shook my world too. So I think that whole period was just such a strange time on many levels for many reasons.
Yeah.
And it's and matter of fact, I don't know if we talked about it or anything, but I recognize the 315 number and everything. That's where my family's from.
Upstate New York.
Yeah. So my both my parents graduated from not Auburn High, but I think East High, the one that went out by the lake. But they're Auburn and Syracuse. They're all from up
Auburn. Yes. I'm probably about a half an hour from Syracuse. Yeah. I'm smack dab right in the middle of the state, which is funny because when you tell people that you live in New York, they automatically want to know what borough. Nobody ever associates the rest of the state. It's just like New York State, and then or anything that's not New York City is upstate.
Exactly.
The whole rest of the state is upstate, for all intents and purposes. But that's cool. So is this where you grew up around here?
I didn't, but my parents did. So my dad, in the Vietnam era, he saw his draft number coming up, so he decided to enlist.
Yeah.
Because then you could choose your vocation.
Right.
And he lucked out. He was in the Navy. Was never on a ship. Was never shot at. He was
most of his career. Same deal. Yep.
Yeah, most of his career he was in cryptology, so he had top secret clearances and encoded and decoded messages. Anyway, so we went out, we traveled all around the world. So for me, I remember that area. I would come back for holidays and visit, relatives and things.
Yeah.
So I've got a lot of memories of the area, but I never actually lived there.
And now, if you don't mind me asking, though, because I do work in healthcare and I am a nurse, what was it? Was age a factor? Did he have other health ailments? Was he anti-vaccine? Like, what was it that precipitated him passing from COVID, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, sure. No, he wasn't anti-vaccine. Unfortunately, there were no vaccines at the time he passed.
Okay.
This was still really early on. I think he would have been more than happy to take it because he was 78.
Yeah.
He was in relatively good health, but I think, he had some probably some lung issues and some heart issues. He smoked for decades. He had quit like 20 years ago, but 15 years ago, but still, so and nobody makes it to that age without some health issues.
No doubt about that. Yeah.
So it was very shocking still, but what are you going to do?
Right. Well, sorry to hear that. When to take a left turn and get talking about the music business, do you I know there's nothing we can do about it, and we've kind of got to go along with the technology, kicking and screaming. And I belly ached about it on here because I'm an old school guy. I just turned 50 years old. I still love a physical product. I still love the days of opening up gatefolds and reading liner notes and all that kind of stuff. And I know we're not going to go back in time. But what's your assessment of where the music industry is right now, though?
Well, I mean, it's always in a very liquid state. You know what I mean? It's transitioning fast. I mean, and just, obviously in our lifetimes, we've seen CDs come and go. We've seen cassettes come and go.
Yeah.
I was never as enamored with the CDs other than they were more convenient, right?
Yeah.
I always loved the vinyl, in particular with vinyl. I mean, it sounds good, but the packaging, when you say reading those liner notes and those photos, it's way more immersive and impressive.
Sure.
On vinyl packaging. It's just also not convenient. It's not transportable. It's, you're going to listen at home, what I mean?
Right.
You don't really take that with you. So I think the thing right now is with all the streaming and everything is it's incredibly convenient. I mean, I have tons of records in the garage, but I don't have a turntable set up or anything like that.
Right.
It's just when I want to listen to something, you pull it up and you pull it up where you are. And
right.
I know it's not as technically as good, but it also doesn't sound bad as long as you got a decent server. So I think that unfortunately the convenience is going to change everything. And then I look at, like my kids, this is what they grew up with. So they don't know.
Right. Me too.
I mean, yeah, vinyl's cool. They like it, but at the end of the day, there's, AirPods and Spotify or something. So it's just how it goes. Everyone's streaming from whatever their preferred platform is. And I love the stuff that they're doing at the immersive stuff. I know Apple Music's really behind it. I think Spotify has got some stuff going on. So does Amazon. They're working on this immersive stuff. But again, if you're listening on binaural systems, it doesn't really matter. Your AirPods for spatial audio, Atmos and all that isn't great. But now, if you're a person, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to be in a true Atmos setup and listen to something that was well mixed in Atmos. If it's well done, it's absolutely staggering. I was
imagine,
the first time I ever did it, and this is going to sound like I'm name dropping, and I kind of am. I was very fortunate that last January, a year ago, January, I got to go do an album in Abbey Road.
Oh, awesome.
And while I was there, through some connections through my people my wife works with and everything, because EMI Studios is owned by Universal now and all that.
Right.
They reached out to someone to say, hey, come say hi to my husband. He's going to be recording there for 3 weeks and blah, blah, blah. I had Giles Martin come down and bring me up and gave me a listen of some Atmos mixes in the Abbey Road Atmos suite.
That's cool.
And I got to hear Day in the Life, the Beatles. And literally, I had tears coming down my face.
I was just going to say, you probably were near tears. Yeah.
It was absolutely amazing. So now now you're talking about the upper end of the quality control, because he, along with other people, are part of the brain trust for all of Universal,
right?
That are quality controlling Atmos and Atmos mix engineers. Now I've heard some other stuff that was done in Atmos that was just absolutely garbage, and I didn't want to hear it like that at all.
Right.
And it's a weird thing, and I think. Going back and remixing old catalog, you have to have the right people. You have to be very careful that you don't lose the original mixes, the original performance.
Right.
And so you really have to make sure that you didn't ruin what was already great.
Right.
And that can happen, and it happens a lot. So, I mean, to me, that's something that could be something in the future. I don't know. I think that it could work because it's scalable. The Atmos thing's scalable. It does go down to your AirPods, but at that point, why bother? But when you listen on something that's a multi-speaker setup, and there's more and more of those coming out, like even just regular home theater receivers, almost all of them have Atmos now.
Yeah.
Now you got to set your speakers up right and all that.
Yeah. So you got the complete experience.
Yeah, but when it's done right, it's absolutely amazing.
And the thing I want to ask, though, is when you put your heart and soul into a project and an album, and I think a lot of this is attributed to the fact that there's a huge influx of music still right now, but everybody is just so preoccupied and finds very little time throughout the course of the day to sit down and actually just enjoy as you said, the immersive experience of music. Used to be you sat down and you listened to an album from start to finish and you didn't pick apart and say, geez, I only want to listen to track 1 and 5. Now it seems like people are doing that more. You got to hit people with singles because the attention span is not as much. But when you put out an album, does any of that weigh in the back of your mind? Like, Jesus, people are going to really gravitate maybe to a couple of tracks, and we might put out 12 great tracks here, but people might never explore some of these deep tracks that we think are so great. Can that be disheartening as a musician when you know that people are just probably going to say, I like that song and this song, and then I'm going to keep it moving and on to the next thing?
I don't know if it's so much disheartening, at least not to me, because I think at the end of the day, when you're working on something, you create something you like, that's really for you on a selfish level, so you hope that it's great when you connect with people. That's really what you ultimately want people to connect. And as long as they're connecting somehow, it doesn't really matter. But speaking to that whole album mentality, it's like, so before our generation, like when you go back in time, it was all about singles.
Yeah.
40s, 50s, 60s, recorded music. It was all about that 45. I was actually just, I was watching a thing on Elvis the other day, and they were talking about his first record. And they said his first record broke all these sales records at the time. It was the biggest selling record at that time. And it was like 300,000 albums. Right?
Yeah.
But they said the biggest single on it, Hound Dog, wasn't on there.
No kidding.
And it wasn't on there, but it was recorded around the same time, but it was released as a single. And the reason they go, you think about it, it's weird. The biggest single wasn't on the album because they didn't care about the albums back then. They sold 300,000 of that album when it came out. They sold 2 million copies of the single.
So you think maybe we're kind of coming full circle, so to speak?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. And I think even though the time now is completely different than back then it was hard to find things. You had to really scour. You had to, live at the record store. You had to listen to the radio to find things. Now it's the opposite problem where we're just like bombarded with it, right? And there's, I heard something the other day, they say there's like 100,000 songs every day being uploaded to digital platforms. You're never going to even be able to scratch the surface of that, right? So that's out the window. So basically everything that you release is noise. Right. At this point. But so now you have to find the things that you like. And I think that when you find an artist that you like, it's in a better interest of that artist to release a string of singles or several EPs, because you can't take 2 to 3 years between an album anymore unless you're really big and hugely established, because your fan base gets bored and they go away. They find other people.
You're done.
Not that they don't like you. It's just something else shows up. Right. So I think the more things you can release, I kind of feel like going back to that old school mentality of an album was an album. It was a collection of singles. I think you can release, even if you pre-release 3 or 4 of those songs, get some traction and do that. I've made a big case years ago, like, when you go out and you do a tour, let's say you tour the summer, right? Generally speaking.
Yeah.
So in the meantime, you release all these songs, maybe you release 15 songs, 1 a month, whatever. And then when you go to do that summer tour, you go, what were the songs the fans listened to the most? The 10 most popular songs, they go on an album, and that's our album summer album. I think that, and I don't know that that's the end all be all either. It's just, I think that is the business side of things, the way to reach people. We have to try a lot of new things because it's just, the system is just inundated. It's not working the way it used to.
Right. But with Kevin having such a such a long history, all you guys, but I mean, when Kevin started this Candlebox thing, it was albums. Does he still have that mentality, or is he willing to shift? Or when you guys get together, does he still say, "Let's write an album"?
Yeah, I mean, we generally do that. Every once in a while, we'll do a one-off here and there. But the thing is, and here's the difficult part, because Candlebox has a great fan base,
right?
And they're used to the albums, right? They look for that, they expect that. So when you do an album as a band, Candlebox, you're going to be able to sell that album to your fan base,
right?
Now at that point, the break is beyond your fan base. You're just like every other new band, even though you're established. Which is, how do you get to people that aren't part of your hardcore fan base,
right?
That aren't waiting for that record to come out, that don't know that it's even coming out, because radio isn't what it used to be, certainly not for rock music, right?
Right.
So back in the day, you'd hear things on the radio and you go, okay, I'm going to go buy that record. Well, now where do you hear it? Spotify playlists, Apple Music playlists. Yeah, you might get some things on new music here and there. But again, 100,000 songs a day coming in there. So even with an established band, I think you can get lost in that whole mix of songs that come out.
Sure.
So I think it's kind of weird. I think it's best for Candlebox to do albums because the fan base knows that, they love that, and they will buy that.
Yeah.
But past the preaching to the converted, as they say, it's difficult logistically. How do you get new people to hear your music? Because the band's really great, the songs are great,
right?
And we win over new fans when we get them. It's just how do you get to enough new fans?
And what is the answer to that? What is the answer to that? Is it playing live and hoping that fans will bring new fans along with them and introduce you guys to them? I mean, because it sounds like I've talked to a lot of musicians on here, and it sounds like right now what's really paramount, is playing live and is the selling of merchandise at shows.
Well, yeah, I mean that does it. I mean, that's a slow growth, but it's a growth. You have to do it because that's also what you are at this point. You have to play live. That is a band. The industry's flipped. We're back, 30, 40 years ago, you went on tour to promote your album because you made your money off of album sales. Now you make an album to get interest, to get people out, to your shows. It's certainly at the least, even if the fan base isn't necessarily clamoring for a new record, it's good for press and promoters. There's something to sell. There's a reason to be on tour, right?
Right.
So it's changed so much. So the whole thing's a little murky. It's like I said, getting beyond what you have, which is thankfully for this band, there's an established fan base. Getting outside of that and getting new people, it's difficult. There's no tried and true, and there's certainly not anything that works that still to this day doesn't involve a shit ton of money, right? To buy radio or to do all these things, and there's no funding for it anymore. You know what I mean? So unless you want to go into your own pocket, those things just aren't happening. The industry as a whole has changed so drastically, so you just have to figure out what's out there. Really, what do you do? What's in your best interest, and take a go at it. And
so it's obviously very daunting for a young band these days, though. It's a very, very slippery slope.
It is, but a new band's going to cut at it differently than Candlebox does. A new band, I don't think, should release a full record, because if you're a new band and you haven't built a fan base, I don't mean this to sound lame, but who cares, right?
Right.
The whole point is you're trying to build that interest, and you're trying to build a buzz, and the more often you can post things and release things and keep things going on, and it's really for established bands and new bands. Honestly, these days, if you can get on TV, if you can get in a movie, I mean, look at Kate Bush. She had that was a decent single in the mid '80s, and then it got on Stranger Things, and now she's getting nominated for the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Up for a Grammy 35 years later. So the power of that is still huge, because our entertainment value has shifted from what we were kids. Now we have everything everywhere, and it's all streaming.
Now, obviously, you make your way all over the place, all around the world, touring and stuff. Have there been times when you yourself, like you mentioned the Atmos experience there, listening to the Beatles, but have you met people in person where you've been extremely starstruck?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I've done this long enough that the starstruck you feel when you're a teenager is far different now, because once you meet enough people that do these things, you realize they're just people.
That's a healthy way to look at it too.
but and you admire their talent, their ability. You admire the work that they do and everything, and you can be very much like, man, I wish I would have written that. I wish I would have recorded. I wish I had that talent. So you, in that regard, but as far as people, so I'll tell a story that I always hold up as a benchmark, as it kind of relates to this. So many years ago, I had a small boutique sound company in town. Just basically, I had a PA and stuff.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to take crappy music gigs. I don't like to play music that I don't enjoy.
Right.
So I would do that when I was off the road to make some dough. So I gotten in, and I was in good with some accounts in LA, and I got a call from a manager of a chain, and she said to me, "Hey, listen, I've got a sound gig for you. It's the easiest gig you've ever done, but I need it to go right. I can't have anything go wrong." I'm like, "Sure, great." And she goes, "It's one microphone. You just have to make sure that this works and it goes well." I'm like, "Fantastic." Paul McCartney was doing a book signing in a Borders in Westwood here in LA.
Yeah.
So I set up and did this thing. He was reading to a group of school children. He'd written this book on death and dying after his wife died. And he read this whole book and yada, yada. At the end, so he takes a big picture with the staff of the store. When they cleared everyone out, they shut the store down. They gave everyone their pre-signed books. And so I'm just wrapping up my stuff. I don't work for the store. I'm just off on the side. He scans the room, sees me, realizes that he hasn't said hi to me and talked to me. He came over and shook my hand and said, "Hey, thank you very much for doing this." If that guy can be that gracious,
boom, blows your mind. Yeah.
Well, that's what I'm saying. First off, no one has a reason to pull attitude and be an asshole. If that guy can be that cool. And the other thing is, I'm a uber fan. I've eaten up everything the Beatles have done and everything that he does. But again, it's like, to me, it's not like fandom of like, oh my God, it's Paul McCartney. It's more like, I would love one day to sit with that guy and just talk music with him and, be able to do those things. And I mean, to be able to like jam a song with him or something, that would be amazing, because he's a person at the end of the day, uber talented, uber successful, and one of the most famous people in the world, but he's still a person. And I guess that's so starstruck. I'm more like, I'm really happy when I get to play with certain people. So I mean, like for me, like one of my big moments when I was younger is, so in a kid growing up, one of the bands I listened to was Scorpions back in the day, right?
Oh, love them. Yeah.
And so I played in a band called Legs Diamond, and we did all this stuff. And we were playing a festival in Texas, and we were the headliners. So if you would have told 13-year-old me this, I would have shit myself.
Yeah.
First act of the day was Uli John Roth.
Crazy.
Then it was Michael Schenker. Then it was a band, Stars, out of New York, who were really big. And then Ronnie Montrose and us.
Wow.
So we kind of felt like we loved all these bands and these artists so much. And Uli and Michael in particular, they played in the daylight and the place wasn't even full yet. It was an outdoor amphitheater. Yeah. So someone in our group, I think it was maybe our keyboard players, like had a great idea. It's like, all these guitar icons, let's ask all the guitar players to stick around, and then they can come out at the end of our show, have a great big kind of curtain call, and we played Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll. Yeah. All together. So I've got a picture of myself standing between Michael Schenker and Uli Roth.
Doesn't get
it. I just think back when I was like 13 years old, putting these records on and just, I couldn't play these songs back then. Like they were so beyond my ability. And to be sharing a stage with them that was amazing.
Mind blowing. Yeah. That's pretty special.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a chance to meet Ronnie Dio on several occasions, who was another
upstate New York guy.
Yeah, that's right. Cortland. Yes.
Yeah. Right down the road. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So,
once in a while, we churn out some talent here in upstate New York. It's more than just snow and depression here.
That's right. That's right.
Although this time of year, it's mostly snow and depression, but it's.
Yeah. The snow's not so bad. The one thing that always kills me about the Northeast is the endless gray sky for like 7 months.
Yeah.
That's the only thing that gets me down up there.
It can be a little brutal here. Yeah.
I can handle it being 20 degrees outside, but let me see some sun.
Sure. Yeah. So I usually like to end or start to wrap up the interviews by asking somebody, and I've been trying to put together a like kind of a compilation of these, the best piece of advice you were ever given. And it doesn't just have to be music world related, just in life advice or whatever, or something that's really stuck with you, kind of that you've kind of, almost adapted to your own moral code.
Well, this one is actually one that I've kind of assembled myself from years, and one that I tell my kids. It's like, you can do anything you want in life, but you can't do everything you want in life. So make some decisions quickly.
That's good. That's good.
You can become whatever, but you can't do it all. I mean, you can do a lot of things, but let's face it, you're taking time away from one to do another.
Okay. New Candlebox will be out. Do we have a timetable on it?
No, we're going into the studio in April. That's
Okay.
all I know at this point. So
Okay.
it's TBD. I would imagine that we're trying to get it out for the summer. I know we're gonna tour heavy this summer. Can't announce what's coming, but it's gonna be a
Right.
massive summer tour.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we'll see.
Well, for me, when I saw you guys here in upstate New York, it was the first time experiencing you guys live. And again, like I mentioned, I got to the venue a lot earlier that afternoon, and BJ was kind enough to sit down with me, which was out of my element a little bit because, like I say, I usually do these remotely, via the computer or the phone or whatever. But the show was absolutely amazing, and what was even more amazing was that I got to meet some great guys and some great guests in your opening band, Hold On Hollywood. They were fantastic.
Yeah, they're a great band, and they're really good dudes. We've done a whole bunch of little runs with them here and there.
Yeah,
and just good guys. Well, like to see them grow and come up. And I know they're always gaining fans and picking up their pop.
Well, already right at the gate though, man. Opening for you, they've been on a Bon Jovi tour. Like they've done pretty nicely for themselves already. They've worked themselves onto some very good bills.
Oh, for sure. I mean, but they have the talent to back it up. They're a really good band, and like I say, they're good guys as well, and that makes a big difference. I mean,
yeah.
At the end of the day, unless you're like somebody who's a megastar, you better be cool because people won't want to work with you. And they're a great band, but they're good dudes, and that goes a long way because people want to help you if you're a good person.
Sure,
and you need help in this business.
And so how do you set these tours up though? Like, do you guys have any leverage? Is this put together by the label? Is this put together by management? Do you guys, does this band catch Kevin's eye and he says, geez, I'd like to take these guys out? How do those kind of tour packages work?
Yeah, Kevin's been very good and very gracious in that regard. Like his entire career, he's always, especially when you're the headliner and you can make those calls, he's always tried to bring out really good bands. I mean, going back to the 90s, I mean, they brought out, Flaming Lips, things like that, and bands that have gotten huge. And because, Candlebox was treated really well in the beginning. They ended up going out with Metallica and Rush and Living Color, and all three of those bands treated Candlebox really well. I mean, Rush paid for their first bus.
Yeah, that's nice.
Because they were driving in a van and they were like, look, we got dough. You guys are going to die driving around in this van while you're touring with us. Forget it. Here's your bus. So, I think that Kevin learned that lesson, and I think it's stuck with him, and he really wants to pay it forward. And when we can, if there's a band that suits the bill, that'll work with us and they're good guys and everything.
Sure.
Yeah, he puts them on there all the time.
Yeah. So Candlebox fans need not worry. Kevin will not be going far on us.
No. Like I say, I think it's getting out of that routine, that cycle.
Right.
And, I would imagine he's still doing things. And you never know. There's always wild cards. Who knows? We might end up with a song in the next season of Stranger Things, and then we won't be able to get off. I know. Jesus Christ. Yeah. And then I won't, and then you won't pay me 5 minutes on here, and you'll be a big star then. No. We always have to come back through. We got to support the upstate New York,
I love it,
the Finger Lakes region's what it's all about, man.
Oh, man. I'm glad to hear you say that, man. Well, listen, man, I could literally sit here and chop it up with you all day. It's been so awesome talking to you, man. And I hope we can stay in touch and we can do this again. And that when you guys got something coming up or just for the fuck of it,
Yeah, for sure. Let me know. And like I say, it's there's always other things going on, and I'll let you know some of the other things I got coming out. Like I said,
please do. Yeah.
If it all goes well, I've got at least 4 records coming out this year. So
awesome. So we'll have plenty to talk about. Yeah. And I look forward to it, my friend. I appreciate it so much, Adam. Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you, brother. Thank you.
Likewise. Take care.
All right. Talk to you soon. Best of luck with everything.
Thank you.
Later on, brother.
Yeah.
There he goes, folks. That's my boy, Adam Curry, not the MTV VJ, not that dude with the, all right, next on MTV. No, that's the real Adam Curry, the bass playing maniac playing in Candlebox. Oh, yeah, Candlebox. Fucking legends. Didn't I promise you guys? It's always legends. Do I not deliver? Adam Curry, Candlebox. You also heard him say numerous other projects coming out. Get on Google, type in Adam Curry with a K, Kury. Go check out and support everything that guy's doing. And of course, how the fuck do you not go out and support Candlebox, one of the true great rock and roll bands that we've spawned here in the United States? Not from England, not from Europe, grown right here in Seattle, Washington, with a lot of other great bands. So do go check out. Last album Candlebox put out was Wolves in 2021, which was a fucking great album. They're still out there kicking ass. You heard Adam say they're going to be doing a lot of fucking touring. Take your opportunity. Go see them. Do yourself a favor because they still sound fucking amazing. I can't stress that enough. So want to thank Adam Curry for being on here with us, man. That was a blast talking to him. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And remember, until we get together here again, remember to take it easy and keep it sleazy.